Hello all and welcome to another session of Pragati Vichar Literature Festival's Authors Marathon. I'm having a wonderful panel, recorded for you. But before that, let's dive into the session and the theme for the day. The theme for the day is healing through personal narratives, and the session we'll be talking about is blueprints for balance, essential practices for stress, sleep, and holistic. Let me introduce you to the wonderful panel I'm having for you. So, first on the panel, we're having Aritra Sarkar, author of Stress to Zest. Aritra Sarkar is a spiritual author and a philosopher who uses storytelling as a powerful medium for social change. His work aims to inspire individuals to lead meaningful lives. Aritra's debut novel, Goliath of Shenzhen 2016, is a groundbreaking dual facing work told in both visual and prose formats. In 2024, Aritra published his novel Stress to Zest Stories and Lessons for Personal Transformation with Penguin Random House India, marking the first installment of his planned series, Parables for Growth. This series explores transformative journeys from various forms of adversity, blending fiction with self help. Aritra, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Next on the panel, we are having Deepa Kanan, author of How to Sleep Better. Deepa Kanan is an allied functional medicine practitioner, Ayurvedic health counselor, and yogini. She focuses on merging the deep science of functional medicine with the ancient wisdom of yoga and Ayurveda through her practice, OHA. In her articles have been shared by Dr. Mark Heyman, MD, a 14-time New York Times best-selling author. She also gave the opening speech on health hacks at Amazon Web Services and Your Story Health Day 2019 to the heads of healthcare startups in India. She has been featured on the award-winning podcast 15 Minute Matrix and UK Health Radio. Thank you so much, Deepa, for joining us.
Thank you. Such a pleasure to be here.
Last but not the least, we are having Dr. Rachna Chhachi, author. Her upcoming book is Healing Autoimmune Conditions. So, with that, Rachna Chhachi specializes in the reversal of chronic lifestyle diseases without medicine and is a certified cancer coach, nutritional therapist, certified international yoga teacher, and also she is WHO certified in malnutrition for infants and children. Founder of Rachna Restores, Unhurry, and Kindness Practice Foundation. Rachna's purpose in life has been to help those suffering from poor quality of life understand the power of holistic nutrition to heal themselves. Thank you so much, Dr. Rachna, for joining us.
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure.
So with that, let's dive into our first question of the day. So each of you writes about health and wellness through different lenses, whether it's through spiritual lessons, scientific perspectives, or lifestyle changes. So how do you ensure that your personal experiences resonate with a wide range of readers, helping them find universal lessons that can be applied to their own lives? So let's start with Aritra first. Aritra, what is your take on this?
Yes. Basically, in my book, I have kind of, I would say, combined my personal experiences with fictional experiences of people who I imagine have gone through various forms of stress. And the reason why I've done it is I feel that, one of the biggest barriers for people to really change themselves is the lack of motivation and particularly lack of self-belief. Essentially, you feel very alone when you're going through a very deep stress. You feel as if no one understands you. You feel isolated. And I think the purpose of the book was not to provide any scientific inputs because there are tons of experts out there and I'm not qualified to provide those. But I wanted to provide that sense of camaraderie and that sense of companionship to make people feel that they are not alone in their problems and journeys, that there are others like them, and therefore they can resonate with the stories and the messages and move forward towards self-improvement. I think that was my approach.
Thank you so much. Deepa, what's your take on this?
I think that, it's very clear whether it's Ayurveda or modern science that perhaps the biggest root cause of all illness is trauma and stress. And I think between my husband, me, and our son, we've collectively faced trauma of sheer poverty, domestic violence, chronic condition. My son is a steroid dependent child with adrenal disorder. So between us, we've seen probably the real worst bits of trauma and been very alone through most of those, except for my son, who has both of us to guide him through it. But two of us have been through all of this very alone and feeling utterly isolated, and which led to chronic illness, which went on for probably a couple of decades. Post that, we've obviously worked a lot using the tools of yoga, Ayurveda, functional medicine. We've come to a state of balance. However, we absolutely see the impact of terrible trauma on the whole stress, what is called the HP axis today, where once it's programmed in a way where you're faced these very dangerous situations, any little stress, even today, can set you off. So you very quickly spiral into that anxiety and that heightened heart rate beating, breathing rate going up. So we faced all of this. And we certainly didn't want people to feel alone, no matter what. And I think there's no small or big stress. I think somewhere there's also this thing that sometimes people feel my stress is bigger than yours. And I don't think it's anything like that. Everyone is going through it. And no matter what is the cause, and no matter what is the level, that person can still feel very alone. They can still feel as if it's impacting. And then I surely have seen that it impacts each of us in a different way. And this is what we're really talking about today. When you said resilience, why is resilience so unique to each of us is something that for me is a lifelong mindfulness practice almost. As why is one person able to cope with something much greater, perhaps, like domestic violence, whereas some people spiral with a small impact of stress in their daily life. But it doesn't mean anything is worse or better than the other, but each of us are feeling that impact. So how can we learn to identify whether we are in that state of heightened stress? And I think the reason I want to end with that is that I'm seeing more and more people who are putting young kids on anti-anxiety medication. It's a very alarming trend. And while we might need medication to get us through crisis, it certainly shouldn't stop us from looking deeper. It shouldn't stop us from helping our kids to learn what is resilience, how can they identify, are they in a state of heightened stress, what can be long-term impact of that stress, and how can we teach them tools so that as a global world we can help people to cope with stress and pay it forward to the person next to them.
Thank you so much, Eva, for such an informative and inspiring input. So with that, let's move to Dr. Rachna. What's your input on this?
So from a personal experience perspective, I think I'm a bit of a poster girl for autoimmune. In 2006, I had rheumatoid arthritis and was bedridden. I was a top leader in a Fortune 50 company, and I had what anyone from the outward world would look at and say, okay, it's a charmed life, successful career, globe trotting. Uh, our daughter was 8 years old, and suddenly with this diagnosis, my entire perfect world collapsed, and the deformities began very rapidly in the disease. So medically, I'm not supposed to be walking. My knees, ankles, wrists, and one elbow, are clinically damaged as per scans and require surgery. And in 2007, I was told that you should start getting your knee replacement and other joint replacements done. But it's 2024, end of the year, and here I am, completely fine. I, globetrot, I do my work. I have a practice across 27 countries. And that that particular disease helped me heal in many ways. The trauma and physical suffering that it caused me. I had a 36-hour labor with my daughter, and it was nothing in comparison to the pain that I went through with my rheumatoid arthritis. So when I chose to heal myself, it just took me 8 months. And I will agree with Deepa over here. I used the power of nutrition and yoga, and in yoga, more the breath work to release my anxiety. And within 8 months, my reports were clinically negative. That's when I said, okay, I need to study So by then our daughter was in class 7 and she was taking her class 7 exams, and I was doing my certification exams for nutrition therapy from Oxford. Then I did my cancer care specialization from Johns Hopkins and my PhD yoga. So every year I study a little so that I can help a little more. And every single case, I don't know if you guys follow me on Instagram, but every single case that comes to me for any chronic condition, the moment they follow the path, clinically, it takes just about 3 weeks for the markers to start dropping, for the reports to start getting better, even for the worst of conditions. And I post that out and I tag the people who are there so that people can see that these are real people who get the real impact. Like you mentioned, Healing Autoimmune Conditions is my 5th book. I've written books on cancer. I've written books on being alive every day and how to wake up with that energy and focus, on detoxification called Shuddha, and my first book, Restore, which was launched by Business World. So it's been a long journey, which was inspired by a personal incident and the resilience to get up and say, no, I'm not going to accept the prognosis of the doctor and be bedridden and deformed for the rest of my life.
Thank you so much, Dr. Rachna, for sharing such inspiring journey with us. So with that, let's move to the hot topic of the day, which is, resilience. So resilience is key when dealing with, stress, chronic conditions, or any lifestyle changes. So how can individuals cultivate resilience through daily health practices? And what role does mindset play in the whole process? So let's start with Deepa first. Deepa, what would be your take on this?
I think that's for me a very nuanced question, because when we say mindset, I've always looked at, does physiology follow psychology or does psychology follow physiology? So I've tried to look at this from a science perspective, an Ayurveda perspective, and truly Ayurveda will always say it's the mind that triggers the body, whereas for sure I've seen from my practice of functional medicine that the body can definitely push the mind in certain directions. And for sure, when we are talking about mental health today, and one of the biggest red flags for me today, especially even with psychology, is that nobody looks at anything that's going on in the body before diagnosing somebody with anxiety or depression or any mental health condition, and before they're put on medication. So I've asked this to several people, clinical psychologists, people who have battled with these issues long term, and the answer is always that these things come later if you want. And for me, that's just not okay. You cannot understand a person's mental health without looking at all these factors. So when we say resilience, when we say mindset, I think I probably feel it's best I describe this from an Ayurvedic perspective, that there are these 3 doshas, Vata, Pitta, Kapha. And when we say today the autonomic nervous system, where this imbalance of fight or flight, sympathetic with the parasympathetic, where we're able to calm down, what modern science says is sympathetic dominant, fight or flight. So we've got this adrenaline and cortisol, our heart rate goes up. This is exactly what Ayurveda described as a high vata state. So Ayurveda said those who have high vata, every illness comes to them, and vata imbalance pushes all doshas off balance. It also said that high vata creates weak agni, which is what today we are talking about, that when we are in fight or flight, we have weak digestion. So what comes first? We really have to think about that. And I think no matter the uniqueness of different individuals, what we can all definitely start with is knowing what is high vata. What do we feel when there's high vata? It means that we can't calm down. We're always restless. We have a tendency to sit and keep fiddling our fingers, fiddling our toes, moving our body. We have elevated heart rate, anxiety, sleeplessness, all of it. And what can we do to counter that high vata? Vata has got this quality of cold and dry, and it makes a person very restless and overactivated. So what can we do? We can counter that by giving the person anything that helps them to still. So yoga nidra, feeling the ground beneath a large section of the body, using pranayama, where what are we doing with pranayama? We are basically bringing the 5 vayus. So vata is divided into 5 wind blowing in different directions in the body, and pranayama calms down this air in the body. So when the tree is blowing in a storm, we can't see the wind, but we can see the impact of the wind on how briskly that tree is moving, right? So that is what high vata does to somebody. You can't see vata, but you can see it as the disruption that it's creating in the body and in the mind. So the person can't sit still, they're not able to do anything. And that's why so many diagnoses today of ADHD or anxiety, restlessness, OCD, all of this comes from high vata. So for sure, we have to think about, do we start with the body or do we start with the mind? And I think really, in many ways, it's easier to start balancing the body to get to the mind rather than forcing the mind to still. A person whose body is in chaos cannot sit and meditate. They cannot sit and really do breath work. So we could definitely add all of those practices, but we certainly need to look at what's happening under the covers.
Thank you so much, Deepa. So with that, let's move to Dr. Rachna. Dr. Rachna, what's your take on this?
The mind and body are intertwined, like you rightly said. I'll just take one example. When we think of our favorite food and we close our eyes, then we salivate. That's a thought. So a thought can cause trauma to the body, or a thought can give us pleasure. And everything emanates from that thought. A perfectly healthy person can collapse because of stress. In my introduction, what was not put is that I'm also a mental health therapist. And when I combine nutritional therapy with mental health therapy, why the results are as good as they are clinically is because I don't work on either or one before the other. When the person is suffering and they come to me, the combination of physical and emotional nutrition. Physical nutrition is what we put in our body and how we move. Emotional nutrition is what we put in our mind and thoughts, and hence whether it causes trauma or it causes pleasure. So I utilize both in my practice to help patients go through 4 stages of healing: rest, repair, recover, restore. It's a vertical ladder healing approach, and it cannot happen if they are not slowing their breath, if they are not being mindful and conscious, and if they are not starting to appreciate the fact that tasks have to be done in a linear manner. So conscious living. Otherwise, we are all dissipated. So the moment you put yourself together and you say, okay, I'm going to do linear tasks, first of all, the overwhelmed patient is going to start following a structure which will help them physically get better. But that's only 50% of the work. The other 50% is I can get someone to be physically better, but the vagus nerve from their brain is going to send a message of stress to their gut. And that continuous vicious cycle is something that I cut starting day 1. And that is what starts changing their perspective. Now, you talked about mindset. Mindset is nothing but perspective. And I have seen clinically similar case history, same gender, similar age groups. One patient will do very well, one patient will not do well or will not survive. It's all perspective. It's how all you approach. Are you approaching your healing saying, oh God, I've got to do this? Or are you approaching your healing saying, this is what is blessing me to get okay? So everything is perspective. And where does that come from? It comes from the mind. The mind is not an organ. The mind is not the brain. The mind is your being. It's your immune system. It drives everything.
Such a unique approach. Thank you so much, Dr. Rachna. With that, let's move to Aritra. Aritra, what's your take on this?
Yeah, this is a fascinating subject. And I can tell you that from my own personal experience, whenever I've tried to cultivate resilience personally, it's never really worked out. So that's brought me to the conclusion that resilience is a byproduct of internal development rather than something that you
Well
strive.
said. Yes.
Now, how do you? Now the question is that how do you develop yourself internally? And the point here that I would like to make is that there's a difference between mental development and inner development. There is a soul which exists beyond the mind and the body. The mind ultimately, I believe, is a sort of a it's a construct essentially, that comes out of the body, but it's essentially linked to the body. But the soul is very different. There's an existence of the soul which goes beyond that. So I think the basic question is, if you focus on development of the soul, then everything else follows. Now, how do you develop the soul? So I think there are two elements which are missing in modern society, which has been sort of depressed and suppressed by a lot of factors, education, politics. One is faith. And faith basically means to have a belief in a higher power greater than yourself. Now, that power greater than yourself can be, you can call it God, you can call it the universe, you can call it nature. And if you're an atheist, you might call it yourself, your higher self. Either way, the belief in a higher power, that something greater than oneself, is essential for long-term, I would say, internal development and consequently mental health. The second is I think mindfulness, or I would say that ability to live in silence. And I think that was one point which was mentioned, by the other speaker. And in this regard, what I would like to say is that it's very important to cultivate practices for self-witnessing. That is, witnessing your thoughts and feelings in an unbiased way. Where you are able to just look at things rather than simply pass judgment on them. And when you develop a habit of that, and you kind of struggle through it for a little while because it's a very painful process, then over a period of time, a lot of higher truths emerge and come to you. And when that happens, you're able to sort of go down a road where you can really follow your passion or that's something you really love to do in a very disciplined, dedicated way. You're able to devote yourself because you have faith. And this combination of devotion, surrender, and sacrifice in the path that you're following is, I believe, the key towards actually developing this internal coping mechanism, which comes as a byproduct actually, because you will gain a lot more treasures along the way. Resilience is simply one of the treasures which come to you along the way. But there are so many other gems and jewels along the way, and you will ultimately feel extremely fulfilled. You'll be productive, and all of that. And more importantly, you will progress spiritually, progress internally. And I think that is the main thing that I would like to emphasize, is that these qualities need to be looked at in totality as a summation, as a byproduct, as a consequence of a much higher form of evolution, which we must strive towards.
Such a fresh perspective. Thank you so much, Aritra. So with that, let's move on to my next question. So, with a growing awareness around stress management, holistic health, and sleep issues, so how do you ensure your readers not only gain knowledge from your books, but are also inspired to take actionable steps towards changing their life? So let's start with Dr. Rachna first.
So each one of my books is focused on practical, easy to implement steps for people who don't know where to start and are extremely overwhelmed. That's the first thing that we need to provide as either health experts or authors. We have to remember that the person is physically and emotionally overwhelmed. And if we make it complicated for them, then they are going to get stuck. So that's the first thing that I do is put down specific steps. I also do things like provide recipes, which are different from what you would get as normal healthy recipes, because that's a real myth. Each condition needs to have a different kind of anti-inflammatory foods. Combinations need to be different. And so each book of mine is focused as a book that someone can refer to again and again and again to ensure that they live a healthier life on a daily basis.
Thank you so much. With that, let's move to Aritra. Aritra, what's your take on this?
Yeah, so I actually feel that, I've seen myself over the period of time and others as well. And I think the biggest challenge for people is really they have all the information at their fingertips these days, but the biggest challenge for them is that trigger to get them moving, in the right direction. So what I try to do in my books is essentially try to present stories that people can relate to, people like them, people such as yourself, and seeing how such people can actually, have moved forward, have changed themselves, with the whole intention that you would then feel inspired from their experiences, and then want to sort of walk their path, or walk in your path towards self-discovery. So I try to take on an inspirational path and appeal to the soul, rather than provide suggestions that might help you in the short term, but which I know ultimately will be debunked by some other science, which will come along the way, But if I can awaken you spiritually and inspire you from there, then I think that will be timeless, That's what I feel.
So, Deepa, what's your take on this?
I think that, in the world of sleep at least, and I keep watching sleep physicians, sleep researchers, and it's almost like they're wearing blinders at times and speaking that same thing. And it's not as simple as just doing CBTI or anything. So when I was looking at sleep, I started to think that functional medicine always says that for anyone, any protocol to work, the person should be having stable blood sugar, smooth elimination, and good sleep. Ayurveda says ahar, nidra, brahmacharya. So the overlap between these two worlds is in the space of sleep. And therefore, I really wanted to script out. So I've really left nothing out. So it was more about thinking that this person is not going to be working with me. They cannot ask me questions. They can't clarify things with me. So they're not working with me for 8 months or 10 months. So how do I give everything? So it has a scripted 4-week plan where week on week there's description of what are the practices, how do you build the daily routine, because Ayurveda is all about routine, and Dr. Rachna also spoke about that, the importance of structure. So daily routine, nighttime routine. So I've scripted it out right from when you wake up to the time you go to sleep for 4 weeks, including how do you identify where are your vulnerabilities, where should you bring deeper focus, how could you tweak those 4-week protocol to further personalize it based upon where are the areas that are disrupting your sleep. So I think if somebody does pick up the book, they'll be able to see it's really like a full Bible of sleep, and you don't really need anything outside of that. It's such a standalone piece by itself.
Very well
No.
said, Deepa. I will just add one thing to this is um, uh, whatever we do in the books, like all the 5 books that I have written, it's extremely rich in clinical data, which is medically proven for all the paths that have been provided and the structure and the plans that have been provided. So when the person is overwhelmed and they follow a particular path, even if they do it half-heartedly, the moment they start seeing so much medical and clinical data supporting what they are doing, the faith to do it starts coming back. And it's the faith that keeps them going and then, starts relaxing their anxiety and hence better quality of sleep.
Just a follow-up question to actually all of you. So how do you, in your multiple books that you've written, so how do you balance the technical jargons along with the essential elements of storytelling? At times when the reader is presented with so much data, or these jargons, we often lose them in the way. So how do you balance these elements, these core elements? So any one of you can start first.
Yeah, so I do it through the storytelling of my patients. So there's nothing more powerful than someone who came as broken as I was or worse, and then you look at their clinical history, you look at their trauma, you look at their anxiety, you look at their poor sleep, and what you did with them and what they did with themselves, because they're choosing to heal. And when they choose to heal, how that story changes. It's the most powerful impact that can have, to anyone who is struggling and who picks up the book and they read that story, then the clinical jargon becomes very easy to understand.
I
Aritra, would you like
think
to please go on? Please go on, Deepa, please go on.
I think I began the book because, one of the things that I find is a sort of a divide between the world of functional medicine and Ayurveda is that sometimes I hear colleagues in functional medicine, when you talk about practices, say from yoga, Ayurveda, and they'll say this is not research backed, or this is not evidence based. And then I see a lot of people in Ayurvedic world, if somebody asks them, so what do I do about my high LDL or high triglycerides? And they'll say labs didn't exist in ancient times, so ignore them. Now, I hate polarity, and for me, it was all about synergy. So I don't want to divide worlds. So the very first thing I wrote about in the book right at the start is that take research with a pinch of salt, and do remember that their research is constantly changing. You can absolutely find something to validate whatever we're looking for, which is what the confirmation bias is, and that that don't neglect the evidence of your body. You could have a research backed protocol, and then your body can tell you something exactly the opposite of that. And don't allow anybody, health practitioner, to push you just because something is research backed. If your body is giving you a cue, so I've started with that just to say that bring your intuition into it. No matter the expert, you are the guiding force. So there is a therapeutic partnership between whoever's guiding you with health and you. It's not just somebody sitting somewhere telling you what to do. For me, it's about empowering the individual, that they don't need to come back to me afterwards. And one of the things which I feel is again a very alarming trend is that I've heard people visit even functional practitioners and who've come back and said that, they don't explain what are those obscure labs that they run. And I was left feeling fearful. And then they said, you're not supposed to understand. For me, it's not that. You don't treat a patient as if they don't have any intelligence. Your job is to empower them to understand everything around them so that they can be their own health advocate. So for sure, I think there's so many nuances to this.
I'd like to support Deepa in this. As early as the 1970s, Mayo Clinic had come out with a research on the anti-inflammatory benefits of Anulom Vilom Pranayam. Now, in normal parlance, when you talk about saying do your breathing and you go to the doctor doesn't say that. And when you show this kind of data, where it does, and then in 3-4 weeks time, you see the C-reactive protein and the ESR tumbling down, and your bad lipids coming back in range. The power of releasing anxiety linked to your physical imbalance starts getting believed. So even when I did my PhD in yoga, I chose the subject of this yogic breathing and mind body interventions specifically for clinical markers, so that the Western world and the linear world that Deepa also mentioned starts believing that the depth in yoga and Ayurveda to heal us is far greater, and we can't be pushed back to keep saying that, oh, but this is not medically proven, or oh, that is not done. So, it's important for us to stand together and dig out that data, so that, as well as put across our own case studies, so that it becomes, I have a lot of doctors who are my patients, and they believe when they follow and when they see the results. But generally speaking, a lot of doctors, medicine dismisses because it's a reactive science. It The genesis of medicine was in reactivity for plagues and for uh, reactive diseases that were coming out. So they don't have a cure. They only have a stopgap arrangement. The cure is in the ancient practices that Deepa and I are talking about, in, going inward, listening to your body, listening to your mind. Uh, the first sutra of yoga is Yoga Chitta Vritta Niruddha. Calm the fluctuations of your mind. So, right now, there's a misconception that yoga is bend your body like rubber. No, the purpose of yoga is to calm the fluctuations of your mind. When you start with that intention, you start going inward. And when you start going inward, that's when you start the healing.
And I think, one more thing is that and very nice that Dr. Rachna spoke about yoga as not bending the body, because I started teaching yoga 25 years ago and people would look at me like I was wasting my life. Now everybody's teaching yoga and it's all about what is the pose you can put a picture of on Instagram, and that's absolutely not it. And therefore, I consciously never put a yoga picture on Instagram, because I don't want yoga to be associated with merely that, because you can really cause stress with yoga when it's done improperly, done under with the mindset of goals and pushing through. I see so many people come getting a slip disc from a yoga class, so there's a lot of that. And I just want to say that, when we're talking about science and ancient wisdom, psychology talks so much about the science of anxiety or depression. And I want to ask you that finally, if they were to look at tools to help that, even psychology takes tools from ancient wisdom. They are talking about the power of breath, which was spoken about thousands of years ago. So, what is the tools that modern science has invented other than medication? Outside of medication, science is still pulling tools from ancient wisdom without giving credit to the ancient wisdom.
I think I want a big resounding clap for what you said.
Yeah.
Really.
That is such a inspiring and creative thing to say. So, Aritra, would you like to add on to this?
I wouldn't add that much because I think they've I think they've hit the nail on the head. But I'll just add one thing, that to me, sleep is actually a consequence of someone who is very internally, some internal balance. So that means essentially two components to me, which is, one is discipline and the other is satisfaction. So I put these, I kind of frame these in one question: is where have you gone today? So it's like, if you can, if at the end of the day you're satisfied with where you have gone in a manner of speaking, I think you would be able to sleep well. And the way you get to there is, I think there's a process where you need to have an internal discipline, discipline of the mind and the body, taking care of not just your physical health, but also your taking care of the way you speak to others, of how you relate to one another. Your language, everything counts over here. The energy that you give out to the world should be in a proper format, following the principles of Yam and Niyam, which are the two primary planks of Patanjali's Yoga Sutra. Applying that not just to yoga, but actually to process of yoga, which is union of the soul self with the ultimate. If you look at it from that perspective. And beyond that, I think that the next part is, I think, is if you follow these processes of internal development in a very, in a manner of devotion, with dedication, then, at the end of the day, you will feel satisfied. There will not be these fluctuations, these thoughts in your head, because you would have filtered the lust which is inside you, and thereafter sleep would follow. It will follow as a natural consequence. So you wouldn't have to chase it; it will come to you. Because there's nothing else for you to, because if you think about it, sleep is like death, and there's nothing really to gain. So you have to reach that state where there's nothing left to gain, and then sleep comes. That's the way I look at it.
Thank you so much. So, while I do have so many questions for all of you, but, since we are a little short on time, let's move to the individual questions that I've prepared for all of you. So, my first question is to Aritra. So, in your book, Stress to Zest, you explore the journey from stress to personal transformation. So, can you elaborate on how your philosophy, helps people move beyond stress and in a more energized, purposeful life? And what simple practices would you recommend to the individuals who are, feeling stuck in the cycle of stress?
Yeah. So, I mean, it's not that I'm saying something which is radically different from what anyone says, or that I'm giving a fantastic formula that you can apply and you get instant results. No. But what I do feel is that, a lot of the stress which we feel is because of external things which are, switch the lens from the outside to the inside. I think that's the first step, where we start looking at ourselves, we start introspective, we start the process of witnessing our thoughts. And thereafter, we try to fix what is the real problem inside, rather than trying to come up with an external solution. And to do that, I think what we really need to build is certain qualities, certain capabilities over a period of time. And we can do that through essentially through devotion, as I said, devotion and belief in a higher power, devotion, and then then the pursuit of passion without attachment. I think that's a very key thing. So everyone has something that they love to do. Like in my case, it's writing. For someone else, it's practicing medicine. But to do that without attachment to the result is key. And the only way you can actually achieve that state is through your internal development along the way, where you are actually devoted to a higher cause, to a higher power, and you can dedicate your achievements, your results to that higher power and become selfless. So ultimately, I would say, if you really see what is the true way of becoming stress-free, it's, I think, selflessness at the end of the day. And some of these practices, I said, they sound very hi-fi, but actually, if you really think about it, they are actually quite realistic. And it boils down to simple things, from starting from, taking care of your physical upkeep, taking care of the way you address and deal with people. It's all focused on your behavior and your interactions with the environment. And moving on in terms of, cutting out all the things which sort of hold you back. You're trying to filter out your lust, trying to manage your ego. And along the way, you will find tremendous benefits that will sort of, that you will experience in the form of reduced stress, of more joyful connections, and also, I think, progress overall in both economic and social terms, as well as most importantly, internal. So.
Thank you so much, Aritra. And I would really try to practice the selflessness that you're talking about. So with that, my next question is for Deepa. So you address adrenal health and its connection to overall well-being. So what are the first signs of adrenal imbalance that people should watch out for, and how can they address this issue holistically?
I think the adrenals are a very misunderstood organ that, endocrinology does not recognize anything except serious pathological adrenal conditions like what my son has. So while there's a lot of talk in the world of naturopathy and holistic health about what is called adrenal dysfunction, endocrinologists do not recognize that. But when we say adrenal dysfunction, it is again in Ayurveda, the gland that is adrenal is overruled by Vata dosha. So we can just look at what is the signs of high Vata. So do we have a tendency to wake up in the morning? Maybe we are anxious to begin with. Maybe we are very restless all the time. We have a predisposition for dryness everywhere, dry colon. We have constipation, sleep disruption, fear, excess worry. So there's a lot of things which tell us that the nervous system is off balance. Now, it's very important that you understand two things about Vata and how it connects to the body's nervous system. That is, the nerves are all surrounded by a layer of fat. Every cell in the body has a cell membrane that is made up of fat. Now, Vata has a quality of dryness, which means in excess, everything in the body dries. So the person requires fats to restore balance. So our nerves need more fat. So we definitely, Ayurveda says that bring the person fats, whether it's from what they eat or whether what they apply. Now, if we don't want to, and I'm not absolutely a person who says only an omnivore diet is good or only a vegan diet is good. That's never my idea. It's that whatever a person wants to choose, how can they be the very best version of their choices? And I think the biggest thing I should say is that no matter what is the diet, don't do low fat or no fat diets, because it's extremely disrupting to the nervous system, predisposing you towards anxiety and sleeplessness. So if you have anxiety, it's very likely you'll have sleep disruption, vice versa. So, we'll wake up at certain times of the night. Vata's time of the night is from 2 a.m. to 6 a.m. So if somebody is waking up, say 2 to 4 a.m., it means they are Vata imbalance. So they're not able to sustain through the night. And there's a very close relationship between what modern science says high cortisol and what Ayurveda says high Vata. So Ayurveda said Vata shrinks the channels of the body. It makes a person predisposed to illness. Modern science says when a person has high cortisol from high stress, that they are going to have a tendency towards inflammation. So we can do a lot, but I think the most important is to not be low fat and make sure that if you're vegan, get fats from whatever, sesame oil, coconut oil, anything. It doesn't have to be ghee, it doesn't have to be animal. So whatever it is, try to get fats. And I think the very best practice for me in calming Vata and helping the nervous system is Abhyanga and oiling the body. So, I've grown up in a culture where my great-grandmother and grandmother lived at home, and every child was told you have to oil your body before a bath. So that has stayed with me for these 47 years, and that's something that I bring to all my clients. And I think the book outlines a lot of very detailed Vata calming practices.
Thank you so much, Deepa. And my last question for the session would be to Dr. Rachna. So, you have guided many through health transformations. So, how do you approach empowering people to take control of their health, especially those dealing with chronic or life-altering conditions?
So first of all, the people who come to me have tried almost everything and have gone to the top doctors globally, and they have been disheartened in some way or the other. So when they hear about me or read about me, they come with a lot of hope of surrendering to the path. So, the universe leads them to me and provides some amount of faith and motivation from day one. Uh, the counseling sessions that I do really help in terms of helping them understand the reasoning, the science, the the depth of the impact that is going to have. And because I have a personal example in healing myself, as well as I have a routine that I, have boundaries of. Um, no, I'm not in a clinic where, I have my clinic, but I don't take on, 20, 30 cases a day. I have a set routine. I take on less patients. I take them on for 5 to 8 months. Some of them stay with me for a year. And we have weekly or fortnightly therapy sessions, which help them stay motivated because they help them change their mindset and perspective from what they were eating, and for a short period of time, why it is being eliminated and how it can come back, and how the breath work is healing them, how music therapy, I use a lot of music therapy as well. And I spoon feed. I provide music links. I provide my own videos for the pranayama. So they find the path easier because they have all the tools as well as the counseling therapy and the logic of why they are giving up their favorite food or their favorite habit for a short period of time, because their body is not in homeostasis. It needs to get back in balance. So that helps them get back in, and helps them start seeing wins. Now, anyone who is with me for 3 to 4 weeks immediately sees the shift. So the battle is for 3 weeks, and I tell them upfront that it is going to be a battle for 3 weeks. So please just, go with it, put your head down. I promise I'll open up your life a little more after 3 weeks, but we need to provide the anti-inflammatory, the calming down, the dousing the fire for 3 weeks. So just rest so that you can recover.
With that, thank you so much, everyone, for sharing such your valuable insights to this session. And from behalf of Frontless and the Pragati Vichar family, I would like to extend the invitation for the joining us through the offering festival as well. So with that, thank you so much, and please join us in the offering festival as well.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for everything. Thank you. Lovely meeting all of you.
Lovely meeting you.